Viewer discretion is advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The federal trial of Diddy Combs took a dramatic turn as Marion Suge Knight, former head of Death Row Records, prepared to testify remotely from prison. Even via grainy video, his presence stirred tension in the courtroom, reviving decades-old rivalries and controversies from hip-hop's darker chapters. Knight's appearance added a new layer to an already high-profile case. Diddy, on trial for federal charges including racketeering and other serious allegations, appeared visibly affected as his longtime rival took the virtual stand. While Knight revisited their tumultuous history, the courtroom watched closely, anticipating new revelations. The prosecution has worked to outline a long-standing pattern of alleged criminal behavior. With each day, new testimonies have chipped away at the image Diddy once projected. The trial, filled with intense scrutiny, now reaches deeper into the past, potentially linking unresolved tensions from one of the most infamous eras in music history. Viewer discretion is advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Tension filled the courtroom as Suge Knight, former head of Death Row Records, appeared via video testimony in Diddy Combs' federal trial. Even through a screen, Knight's presence was striking, older and grayer, but still commanding. Diddy leaned forward, visibly uneasy, as a longtime rival emerged from his past. The prosecution began by establishing Knight's legacy in the music industry, including his role in the East Coast-West Coast feud of the 1990s. When asked to describe the rivalry between Death Row and Bad Boy Records, Knight referred to it as a war, marked by threats and constant tension. He claimed there were warnings at the time suggesting danger to both him and 2Pac's Shaker. The conversation shifted to the night of 2Pac's death in Las Vegas in 1996. Knight described the heightened atmosphere that evening after an earlier altercation at the MGM Grand. He recounted feeling that violence was imminent. Then came the prosecution's key question: had Knight ever heard of any discussions or plots involving harm toward 2Pac? Knight responded with a serious accusation, claiming he'd heard rumors of a bounty, an allegation immediately met with objection by Diddy's defense team. The judge allowed the testimony to continue but instructed the jury to treat such statements with caution, especially those based on hearsay. While Knight's words echoed decades of speculation, their legal impact remains uncertain. Viewer discretion is advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The courtroom was already tense when Suge Knight, appearing remotely from prison, was asked directly, did he believe Diddy Combs had any connection to 2Pac's Shaker's 1996 murder? Knight, once the feared head of Death Row Records, didn't hesitate. He described hearing repeated warnings and claims from individuals he called credible in that world, alleging that a bounty had been placed on 2Pac's head. Knight claimed he was approached indirectly by people with supposed ties to East Coast groups, suggesting a large sum of money was being offered to take down key death row figures. While he offered no specific names, he claimed certain individuals linked to Diddy's circle were seen in Las Vegas during the infamous Mike Tyson fight weekend, adding to his suspicions. When asked if he ever went to the police, Knight dismissed the idea, saying authorities weren't interested in what he had to say. He also alleged that investigations into 2Pac's death were never thorough, implying that influence and money may have steered them away from the full truth. The prosecution then asked about the murder of Christopher Wallace, the notorious Big, 6 months after 2Pac's death. Knight claimed the retaliation narrative was convenient but oversimplified. He suggested Wallace's death may have had deeper roots, possibly tied to knowledge he allegedly had about industry tensions and behind-the-scenes dealings. In his most explosive claim, Knight stated, $1 million. Puff put it out there. He's responsible for Pac's death, period. The courtroom was stunned. Reporters scrambled to file updates. Diddy's lawyers objected fiercely, calling the testimony baseless and inflammatory. While the judge reminded the jury to treat speculative claims cautiously, the moment had landed. Diddy, facing unrelated charges in a separate federal case, now had to contend with a decades-old accusation resurfacing in full public view. This time, in a courtroom. Whether it affects the current trial remains to be seen. But for the jury, and the world watching, it was a dramatic reminder that hip-hop's most notorious mysteries continue to cast long shadows. Viewer discretion advised. The following is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The courtroom atmosphere turned electric following Suge Knight's remote testimony. Legal analysts immediately weighed in. Was this credible? Would it sway the jury? Despite Knight's criminal history and clear past tensions with scene Diddy Combs, prosecutors introduced his words as part of a broader narrative, an attempt to show that the allegations against Diddy were not isolated incidents, but part of a pattern stretching back decades. Knight's testimony, however controversial, painted Diddy as a figure with a long history of ruthless ambition. The prosecution appeared to use this to build a case for intent and character, arguing that Diddy's alleged misconduct in the current trial echoed a much darker past. While the defense was expected to challenge Knight's motives and credibility, the courtroom and media could ignore the weight of his claims. Some of Knight's statements touched on rumors that had circulated in hip-hop circles for decades, now spoken under oath. His claim that law enforcement failed to fully investigate 2Pac's Shaker's death due to influence and reputation added another layer to the prosecution's portrayal of Diddy, a man who allegedly evaded accountability through power and money. Even if the specifics of Knight's testimony don't directly impact the current trial's outcome, the optics were damaging. It reminded the jury and the public of Diddy's presence in one of the most volatile chapters of music history. The idea that professional jealousy may have fueled extreme actions, as Knight suggested, served to support the prosecution's claims of Diddy's alleged pattern of control, manipulation, and intimidation. In the defense's corner, the argument was clear. Suge Knight is a convicted felon with a personal grudge, offering unprovable accusations from prison. But for a jury already steeped in disturbing allegations, even hearing these claims might color perceptions. And Knight's delivery, cold, calculated, unwavering, made an impact. Whether seen as a desperate smear or a long-buried truth, Knight's testimony was undeniably powerful. His words seemed to drag the ghosts of hip-hop's most tragic era straight into the present trial, blurring the lines between music history, myth, and courtroom fact. Disclaimer: the following is a fictionalized dramatization for commentary and analysis purposes only. Diddy's reaction to Suge Knight's testimony, visibly agitated, whispering sharply to his attorneys, did little to help his case in the eyes of the jury. Just as during earlier outbursts, it risked being interpreted not as outrage from an innocent man, but as the frustration of someone exposed. The prosecution's decision to feature someone as controversial as Knight signaled their readiness to pull no punches, diving into the gritty and unresolved legacy of the 90s hip-hop wars. This testimony followed closely on the heels of explosive allegations from other witnesses, Gene Deal with claims tied to Biggie's death, and Kid Cudi's account of a disturbing incident. Now, jurors were being presented with a cumulative narrative that Diddy had long been surrounded by chaos, intimidation, and violence, whether through direct action or troubling proximity. Knight's suggestion that past investigations into 2Pac's murder were mishandled or misdirected echoed long-standing public doubts and suspicions, and by framing himself as a potential target, not just a bystander, Knight gave his statements an emotional urgency that could resonate with jurors. His testimony also chipped away at any attempt by the defense to paint Diddy as a former victim of the infamous East Coast-West Coast feud. Instead, Knight positioned Diddy as an aggressor, someone allegedly willing to go to disturbing lengths to protect his brand and dominance. What unfolded in that courtroom was more than a trial. It was a clash of legends. One man testifying from prison, the other seated in silence, his empire under siege. The prosecution, weaving a story of Diddy as a man whose ambitions may have led to a legacy steeped in control and destruction, were no longer just focusing on recent charges. They were painting a broader, more ominous portrait, one that cast a long shadow. The defense, meanwhile, faced the monumental task of discrediting not just one man's words, but decades of rumor, reputation, and public suspicion. Knight's detailed and dramatic claims, while unverifiable in parts, aligned with theories that had long circulated in hip-hop culture. And now, those theories were entering the courtroom under oath. The prosecution's story was clear. This wasn't just about modern accusations. This was a legacy trial, one where jurors were asked not just to evaluate evidence, but to wrestle with the history of an entire era. With Diddy now linked in testimony to incidents involving three prominent artists, 2Pac's Shaker, Biggie Smalls, and Kid Cudi, the pattern prosecutors suggested was impossible to ignore. Whether or not the jury believed every word, the impression was powerful. A decades-long tale of ambition, silence, and power struggles at the highest levels of the music industry. Suge Knight's voice, rasping through the video feed from prison, brought the past hurtling into the present. The question hanging in the air wasn't just about guilt in the charges at hand, but whether the legend of Diddy was now unraveling under the weight of the very history that made him. Disclaimer: the following is a fictionalized dramatization for commentary and analysis purposes only. Suge Knight's testimony added a powerful new dimension to an already dramatic trial. His claim that influential figures might have swayed the original investigation into 2Pac's murder spoke directly to the prosecution's central theme, that Diddy wielded vast power and influence, often unchecked. Whether true or not, the suggestion painted a haunting picture of systemic failure and possible manipulation. Even more chilling was Knight's implication that Biggie's death may have conveniently shifted attention away from questions about 2Pac's. It was an unsettling notion, one that, if believed, portrayed events long considered tragic rivalries in an entirely new, calculating light. The jury now faced a difficult question. Was Knight simply a vengeful figure from the past with personal motives, or was he, despite his own notoriety, finally speaking a truth too uncomfortable to face? Until now, what was certain was that his testimony would rekindle long-dormant questions around 2Pac's unsolved murder, and with it, fresh public scrutiny over every figure implicated. Legal experts anticipated increasing pressure on authorities to revisit the case in light of these newly publicized claims. Diddy's legal team now had to fight on multiple fronts, contesting the current serious charges while also addressing explosive allegations that reached back nearly 30 years. It was no longer just a courtroom defense. It was a battle to protect a legacy now under siege from every direction. As Knight's video testimony concluded, silence filled the room, followed only by the relentless tapping of reporters' keyboards. Diddy remained still, visibly shaken, absorbing the latest shock to his defense. The prosecution's strategy was clear: to frame Diddy's present troubles as the natural outcome of a long-standing pattern of control and intimidation. The courtroom was no longer just a venue for this trial. It had become a stage for reckoning with a turbulent chapter of music history. The question now: would Knight's claims, despite their controversial source, be the turning point that cemented the jury's view of Diddy not just as a defendant, but as a man whose past may finally have caught up with him?